Welcome to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. What you're about to hear might sound like fiction, but for someone out there, it's the truth they never got to tell. My name is Caroline Brooks. I'm 36 years old. And this is the story of how I went from being the forgotten one, barely tolerated at family dinners, to the woman they watched drive away in a limousine with their jaws on the floor. Thanksgiving was never my favorite holiday, but that year, it managed to scrape the bottom of a barrel I didn't even know had a bottom. I spent the entire evening before carefully baking a pumpkin pie from scratch, the same one my cousin Julia said she loved last year. It was a desperate attempt to offer something, anything that would make me feel seen. But deep down I already knew. The invitation from my sister Rebecca wasn't genuine. Never was. Just a formality, a last-minute pity add-on after she had RSVP'd her inner circle. Still, my kids Josh and Lily were excited. That's the only reason I said yes. Rebecca's mansion in North Salem looked like something out of a Hallmark movie. Twinkling lights lined the wrought iron fence. Wreaths on every window. Classical music spilled into the driveway as we pulled up. Josh held my hand tight. Lily carried the pie like it was some sacred relic. I took a deep breath. "Okay, team," I whispered. "Let's make it through today." Rebecca answered the door in a deep burgundy velvet dress that clung to her like it was custom-made. Her hair curled into soft waves, makeup flawless. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Caroline, you actually came." I leaned in for a hug, but she didn't move. Instead, her eyes zeroed in on the pie box in Lily's hands. "I told you not to bring anything this year," she said, and her voice was syrupy sweet with just a touch of steel. "Pumpkin pie. Let's hope it's not too sweet." And just like that, she turned on her heels and walked away, leaving us in the foyer like forgotten coats. The house was packed. My mother, our cousins, Rebecca's friends from her country club, all dressed in muted tones with sparkling accessories and practiced smiles. I saw the table. Long, dramatic, elegant, magazine-worthy. Everyone had a seat. Everyone but us. We stood near the door for nearly 5 minutes before anyone acknowledged us. I tried to smile through it. Always do. I set the pie down in the kitchen. Josh helped Lily out of her coat. But then Lily tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, why isn't anyone saying hi to us?" I knelt and tied her shoelace, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "They're just busy, sweetheart," I said softly. "We'll sit soon." I was wrong. Rebecca returned, holding her phone, a faux frown pasted across her perfectly contoured face. "I just checked the seating chart," she said. "It's a little tight this year. Caroline, would you mind sitting in the side room? There's a small table in the laundry room. It's been cleaned." I blinked. "The laundry room. It's cozy. And quiet. The kids will be more comfortable. Better than squeezing in." She winked like it was some kind of favor. I should have said no. I should have grabbed my kids and walked right out of that house. But I didn't. Smiled. Picked up the pie. Nodded. The laundry room smelled like bleach and dryer sheets. A small wooden table was shoved next to the humming washer. 2 folding chairs. Plastic kiddie chair. No tablecloth. Just a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. Josh sat down without a word. Lily climbed onto the little chair and folded her hands in her lap. No one came to check on us. No one brought plates or water. Just muffled laughter and the clinking of wine glasses from the next room. I opened the pie and cut 3 slices. That would be our dinner. Then Lily asked, "Why doesn't Aunt Rebecca want us to sit with everyone?" I smiled the way I'd trained myself to. "It's not that they don't want us there," I said, voice tight. "They just don't understand." Josh looked at me, his brown eyes older than they should have been. "Maybe we shouldn't come next year, Mom." I didn't answer. Couldn't. That moment, under cold light between a washer and a dusty cabinet, I realized something. This wasn't a holiday. It was a humiliation dressed as tradition. But instead of falling apart, I sat straighter. I poured water into 3 plastic cups and raised mine like I was in a 5-star restaurant. "Happy Thanksgiving, babies. Wherever we are." If we're together, that's enough. Lily smiled. Josh raised his cup. And I felt something shift inside me. Something small, quiet, but certain. Then we heard it. Tires crunching on the gravel just outside the tiny window above the washer. I looked up. So did Josh. Lily sat straighter in her seat. Headlights stopped at the back door. Not a regular car. Not a neighbor's truck. Limousine. Josh's mouth dropped open. Mom, that car. I moved to the window, peering through the frosted glass. A man in a black suit stepped out. Then he opened the door. And she stepped out. A woman in a slate blue coat with silver hair and heels that didn't sink into the gravel. She didn't hesitate. Didn't look confused. She looked directly at the laundry room door. Lily whispered, "Mommy, she's looking at us." I stood frozen. Then cracked the door open. The cold air rushed in, crisp and smelling faintly of jasmine. "Hello," she said. Her voice was low but strong. "I'm looking for Caroline Brooks." My mouth opened. "That's me." She smiled. "Good. I'm Evelyn Rodas, Executive Director of Voices Rising." My breath caught. "I'm here because of a story. A post you wrote on a community forum. About rebuilding your life after living in a shelter." My knees almost buckled. I remembered that post. Written on a cracked phone screen late at night, while Josh had a fever and Lily slept beside me on the couch. I hadn't written it for anyone. Just needed to breathe. And somehow someone had read it. Evelyn stepped forward. "We've been looking for you for 6 months. Your name appeared on an old volunteer list." Came myself. "I didn't expect to find you here." She glanced at the washer. I laughed softly, embarrassed. "I didn't expect to be found here." Then she said words that would change everything. "We'd like you to be the keynote speaker at our spring conference. To share your story. Unedited. We'll compensate you. We also want to publish your story as a book, with full control in your hands." I stared at her, stunned. "I'm just a mom," I whispered. "Just trying to survive." Evelyn looked at me like I'd said something ridiculous. "That's exactly why we need you," she said. "We don't want perfection. We want truth." Josh looked up at me, eyes wide. "You'll do it, right?" I looked at them. At Lily. At Evelyn. "Yes," I said. And just like that, the door opened. Not to a room, but to a new life. The air felt different as we stepped outside. Crisp and biting, but it carried a kind of freedom with it. I held my children's hands as we crossed the backyard gravel path, leaving behind the humming washer, the plastic chair, and the sound of laughter that had never been meant for us. The limousine door opened, and for a second I hesitated. Not out of fear, but disbelief. Could this really be happening? Evelyn gently touched my elbow. "Come on, Caroline. You've been standing at other people's thresholds long enough." Inside the limo, it was warm and dimly lit, smelling faintly of leather and lavender. Josh clutched the pie like it was a family heirloom. Lily's face was wide with wonder as she pressed her fingers against the glowing buttons on the door panel. I looked out the tinted window. Rebecca's house shrank behind us like a distant memory, each string of twinkling lights fading until they were nothing more than blurred smudges in the glass. Evelyn spoke gently. "I know this is a lot, but I've wanted to meet you for a long time, Caroline. You said you found me because of a post?" "Not just one," she replied. "We've been quietly following your writing for months. You wrote about scraping together $3 for gas, turning instant noodles into a celebration, about sleeping in your coat so your kids could have the blanket. You wrote those things like nobody was listening. I didn't think anyone was. I was." I swallowed hard. For a moment I could see it. Me huddled at that old kitchen table with my fingers numb from the cold and my heart heavier than I could carry. Typing on that busted screen not because I had hope, but because I needed to let it out somewhere. "I still remember one line," Evelyn said softly. "You wrote, 'I don't want my kids to grow up thinking they have to toughen up to survive. I want them to know they deserve to dream.'" That stayed with me. My throat clenched. I blinked fast, staring out the window. "I just wrote so I wouldn't fall apart." And that's what made it real. The rest of the ride was quiet. The city lights grew brighter. Lily leaned against me, eyelids fluttering. Josh finally set the pie down in his lap and asked, "So, are we famous now?" Evelyn chuckled. "Not famous, but respected. There's a difference." We pulled up to a quiet, understated restaurant with a golden sign above the door. Inside, it was all soft lights, the scent of warm bread, and the low murmur of conversation. We were led to a private room where a small table waited for us. On it, a folder with my name printed in neat bold letters. Caroline Brooks. Keynote speaker. Voices Rising Spring Summit 2026. I stared at it, my breath catching. Evelyn gestured. "This is a preliminary contract. If you say yes, we take care of everything. Travel, lodging, childcare. We want you to focus only on your story. And we want it told in your voice, on your terms." I opened the folder. The pages were clean, respectful. No fine print traps, no buried conditions. And there it was again, my name. My name in a place of authority, not pity. I looked up at Evelyn. "Why me?" "Because the world needs women like you," she said. "Not polished perfection, but lived in truth. You don't need credentials. You are the credential." Josh leaned over and took the pie box from my hands, as if telling me silently, "You can let go now." Lily curled closer, whispering, "Mom, they chose you because you're you." The weight of those words knocked something loose inside me. I had been chasing acknowledgement my whole life, only to find that the world had already started turning toward me. I just hadn't noticed. Evelyn lifted her glass of water and raised it toward me. "Caroline, it's time you start believing in yourself. Because we already do." I smiled through the tears. For the first time, they weren't born from shame or sadness. When the dinner ended, I signed the contract. The pen shook in my hand, but not from fear. It was the sound of a door unlocking. The limo ride back was a blur. Not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I was finally letting go of the weight I'd carried too long. Every dark stairwell, every cold floor I'd slept on, every time I'd folded a bill and whispered, "Please let this be enough." None of it had broken me. Had made me visible. Josh whispered, "You kind of look like a celebrity." I laughed. "Not a celebrity, honey. Just seen." When we passed Rebecca's house on the way back, I couldn't help but glance toward the large dining room window. I saw her, my sister, standing by the fireplace, wine glass in hand, frozen. My mother stood beside her, lips parted in disbelief. And Blake, Rebecca's husband, stared down at his phone, then back out at the limo as if unsure whether to believe what he was seeing. They had given me the scraps. Tonight I was being offered a stage. When we pulled up to the hotel Evelyn had arranged for us, the driver opened the door and held out a hand. I stepped out with Lily on my left and Josh on my right. A rush of cold air hit my cheeks, but it no longer stung. We checked into the suite. It was simple but elegant, with 2 bedrooms and a welcome basket that Lily immediately dove into. Josh claimed the remote and sprawled on the bed like he belonged there. I stood at the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, a girl just like me was sitting in her own version of a laundry room, wondering if she mattered. And I knew now. It had never been about being invited to someone else's table. It was about building your own. I turned from the window and looked at my kids, their faces relaxed, safe, whole. "We're home," I whispered. Lily looked up. "This isn't our home." Smiled. "No, but it's where we start." That night I couldn't sleep. Not out of worry but anticipation. A soft energy hummed through my chest. I stood in the suite's tiny kitchenette, sipping tea and scrolling through my old blog posts. Each one was like an old scar. But I didn't flinch. I opened a blank document, typed one sentence. "I used to be the girl they put in the laundry room. Now I'm the woman they wait to hear speak." And just like that, the story truly began. Morning light streamed through the hotel curtains, soft and golden, painting the suite with a gentle glow. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of survival pressing down on my chest. No alarm clock, no rushing to a morning shift. No sick child wrapped in blankets while I debated between rent or groceries. Just breath. Just stillness. Just me, Josh, and Lily, wrapped up in clean sheets and the kind of peace I never thought I'd feel in a strange bed. We had breakfast delivered. Tiny pancakes, fruit bowls, warm croissants. Josh devoured his like he hadn't eaten in days, and Lily, still in her pajamas with one sock off, quietly arranged the sugar packets by color. I sat between them watching. Not speaking. Just watching. At 10 o'clock sharp, Evelyn knocked gently on our suite door. She entered like she always did. Graceful, steady, but with that spark in her eyes like she always carried a mission in her back pocket. She handed me a fresh copy of the contract and a schedule printed on creamy paper. We have a press dinner next week, and the conference is in 6 weeks. But today, she said, is about you and your story. There's a studio waiting for us. Blink. Already. Evelyn nodded. We move fast when the right story comes along. Josh raised an eyebrow from across the room. Are we going to be on TV? Eventually, Evelyn said with a smile. But for now, your mom's going to be recording her story, her voice, her truth. And you'll both be right there with her. That afternoon, we rode across the city in the same limo, but I felt different now. Hummer. My back straighter. My voice steadier. I looked out the window and caught my reflection. Not the woman who sat in a laundry room, but the woman with a message worth amplifying. The studio was tucked into a building that looked plain from the outside but held warmth and welcome within. The receptionist greeted us like we mattered. The producer shook my hand like he'd known me for years. And the sound engineer, a young woman named Cass, offered Lily a pair of pink headphones while Josh got a quick tour of the control room. Inside the booth, the microphone stood like a quiet judge, waiting. I put the headphones on and adjusted the mic. My hands trembled at first, but Cass's voice came through the glass. Just speak like you're talking to someone you love. So I did. I spoke the words I thought I'd buried. I spoke about my ex-husband. How he left the moment things got real. How he said I'd ruined his life by getting pregnant too early, when it had taken me 5 years just to carry a child to term. I told them how he emptied our account and left us with $17 and a broken refrigerator. I talked about the shelter. About how sleeping in the same room with 6 strangers made you question every decision you'd ever made. About working double shifts at a diner where customers never looked me in the eye. And managers reminded me that I was lucky to have the job. And I spoke about that blog. The posts typed with cracked thumbs on a borrowed phone. Posts that said things like, I cried on the bathroom floor today, not because I'm weak, but because I didn't want my kids to hear me break. I didn't cry in the booth. I thought I might. But the words felt warm as they poured out. Cleansing even. Like dust finally shaking loose from the corners of my soul. When I stepped out, Evelyn had tears in her eyes. Josh whispered, Mom, you sounded like someone on the radio. Lily nodded solemnly. Your voice is what home sounds like. I knelt and kissed her forehead, gripping her hands in mine. You are the reason I found it. That night, back at the hotel, Evelyn handed me another envelope. There's something else. A publisher in Boston loved the recordings. They want a memoir. Full length. In print. And an audiobook version narrated by you. I opened my mouth to speak but nothing came out. I just stared. They'll give you time, she said gently. They're not rushing. But they want your story. Real. Yours. I touched the edge of the contract like it might burn. Why me? Evelyn gave the softest smile I've ever seen. Because you're no longer asking for a place. You're becoming the place. A voice that makes others believe they can be seen too. Josh held my hand the whole time I signed it. The next few weeks were a blur. Media interviews, meetings with editors, speech coaching, though most of the time they told me to just keep doing what I was doing. I began waking up with ideas, memories, lines I wanted to write. The words came fast, but so did the healing. Each page I typed was another brick in the home I was building for myself. Not the physical kind, but a home made of truth. Lily helped design the first draft of the book cover. She chose soft orange and deep brown, like fall leaves and pumpkin pie, she explained. I didn't correct her. She wasn't wrong. Then came the day of the conference. The ballroom was massive. Rows upon rows of folding chairs, warm stage lights, banners with my name. I stood backstage, hands trembling around my speech. Josh peeked from the curtain and whispered, "Mom, it's packed." Peek too. Hundreds of women. Some in power suits, others in thrifted dresses. Some with babies on their hips, others wiping away tears before the event even started. I took a breath and stepped out. The applause didn't come immediately. That only made it more real. They weren't clapping out of politeness. They were waiting to see me. And I let them. I began with a sentence that had been burning in my chest since that night at Rebecca's house. I was the girl they sat in the laundry room because they thought I was used to scraps. But today, I stand before you because I never stopped believing I deserved more. Silence. Then applause. Then standing applause. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. I was expanding, owning space. After the speech, a woman in the audience rushed up and hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. "You told my story," she whispered. "And now I believe I can tell it too." Evelyn stood off stage, clapping softly, her eyes glassy. Josh waved from the front row. Lily held up a cardboard sign she'd made that read in glitter glue, "Mom's the keynote." I walked off that stage not just as a speaker, but as someone who finally, truly belonged. I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was anxious. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart too full to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of women in the audience. Some had been crying, others nodding, their hands clenched in silent solidarity. And then I remembered that moment on stage when I said, "I used to think family was the people who share your blood. But now I know it's the people who make you feel like you matter." That line had echoed like a bell through the ballroom. Not because it was profound, but because it was true. The next morning I opened my email and found over 400 new messages. Some from attendees, others from strangers who'd watched the live stream. One woman wrote, "You made me believe I wasn't crazy for feeling invisible in my own family. I left my brother's house at Christmas last year because he said I was too loud, too much, not classy enough. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Another said, "I read your blog when I was living in my car with my daughter. Your words were the only thing that made me believe I wasn't trash. You were my lifeline." I sat at the hotel room desk with my hand over my mouth, tears slipping past my fingertips. Lily padded over in her pajamas and sat beside me, quietly watching the screen. "Mom," she said, "are you crying because people love you?" I nodded. She smiled. "Good. You should let them." That afternoon, Evelyn called with more news. The audiobook publisher had decided to promote the memoir as one of their Voices That Matter titles for spring. The book would be featured on banners, social campaigns, even billboards in major cities. "We want your face to be everywhere," she said. "Because you're not just a writer, Caroline. You're a movement." Sounded like a dream someone else might have. But this was mine. Within weeks, my name was appearing in places I'd never imagined. Interview requests came from morning talk shows and online platforms that once would have ignored my pitches entirely. One blog even called me the laundry room speaker, which made Josh laugh until he cried. "You're gonna be a meme, Mom," he said. "That's how you know you've made it." But the most surreal moment came 2 weeks later when I received a phone call from Rebecca. At first, I didn't recognize the number. But something in me, some instinct, made me pick it up. "Hello," said Oz. Then, "Caroline, it's Rebecca." Froze. Her voice sounded different. Careful. I saw the video. The conference. You looked amazing." I said nothing. "I didn't know," she continued. "I didn't realize." "Didn't realize what?" I asked gently but firmly. "That I mattered." There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry. It wasn't the apology I wanted. But it was the only one I'd ever get." "I appreciate you saying that," I said. But I'm not the same woman you put in the laundry room. That version of me died the moment I stepped out that door. Another silence. I just wanted you to know, she finally said. Mom's been asking about you. Tell her I'm doing well. I ended the call without anger. Without bitterness. Just peace. 'Cause something had shifted. Not just in how the world saw me but in how I saw myself. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't performing for scraps of validation. A few days later, I stood in the office of Voices Rising, reviewing early cover concepts for my book. Evelyn and I sat across from a creative director who laid out mock-ups on the table. One showed me sitting at a small table with Lily and Josh, the laundry room subtly blurred in the background, light glowing from a window above. Another had just my hands, one holding a pen, the other gripping a child's hand. But it was the third one that stole my breath. A photo of me from the conference, standing on stage, eyes lifted toward the lights. Behind me, barely visible, the outline of a washer and dryer, faded like a memory. That one, I said softly. That's the truth. Evelyn nodded. Then that's the one. That evening I cooked dinner for my kids in our new apartment. A modest place in Brooklyn, but with a balcony and 2 bedrooms and a little kitchen filled with light. I made spaghetti and garlic bread, and Lily insisted on folding the napkins into triangles like she saw in magazines. Josh played soft music from his phone, and I caught him staring at me with this strange look on his face. What? Yes. You're different now. Good different. He nodded. Yeah. You used to walk like you were bracing for something. Now you just walk. I let that sink in. Later that night, as the kids fell asleep, I returned to my laptop, opened the draft of the second book, one I hadn't planned to write but couldn't stop thinking about. I typed, "Some people will sit you in a laundry room and tell you it's for your comfort. But what they really mean is, they're uncomfortable with your presence. Let them be uncomfortable. Sit in the laundry room like it's a throne. One day, the world will knock on the door, and you'll be ready." As I typed, a message popped up in my inbox. It was from a woman named Cassandra, a producer from a national TV segment called Voices of the People. She wanted to feature my story in a Mother's Day special. Not just me but Josh and Lily too. "They've seen the clips," she wrote. "And they believe your family is a symbol of real resilience." I sat back, hand over my mouth again. Then I looked at the calendar. It had been exactly 6 months since Thanksgiving. 6 months since the laundry room. 6 months since I was quietly placed out of sight like an afterthought. And now, I was everywhere. Not out of ego. Not out of revenge. But because when the world saw me as small, I dared to grow anyway. The night before the national interview aired, I found myself staring into the mirror longer than usual. Not because I was worried about how I looked, though sure the makeup artist had done her magic, but because the woman staring back at me didn't feel like a stranger anymore. She felt solid, earned, whole. My curls were pinned loosely, just the way Lily liked them. I wore a soft beige blouse, the kind that flowed instead of clung. Josh had picked out the earrings, and when I asked why, he just shrugged and said, "They look like confidence." I laughed then, but now, hours later, I understood what he meant. Sometimes confidence wasn't loud. Sometimes it was quiet, worn like a second skin. Invisible to the world, but unmistakable to the person wearing it. The studio was buzzing when we arrived. Bright lights, crew moving around like clockwork. The producer, Cassandra, greeted us at the door and introduced us to the host, a kind-eyed woman named Marlene who held my hands like she already knew me. "We've been waiting for your story," she said softly. "You're not just a voice, Caroline. You're a mirror. You show people what they've survived." The interview took place on a set dressed like a living room. Soothing tones, soft chairs, a vase of sunflowers between us. Josh and Lily sat off camera, but close enough that I could see their faces if I turned my head just right. Marlene began with easy questions. My background, the early days, the blog posts. But then she leaned forward and asked, "What was the moment that changed everything?" I didn't even have to think. "The laundry room," I said. There was a beat of silence. I had spent years being overlooked. I told myself it was okay as long as my kids were okay. I sat in the shadows and let others go first. I made peace with not being remembered. But that night, when my sister told me I'd be more comfortable eating Thanksgiving dinner beside a washing machine, something inside me snapped, not in anger but in clarity. I realized that I'd been accepting scraps, not because I was unworthy, but because I forgot how to expect more. Marlene nodded, eyes shining. And when that limo pulled up, I didn't step out of that house. I stepped out of the version of myself that thought invisibility was safer. The interview ran long. And when it ended, the applause from the crew felt warmer than any holiday toast I'd ever received from my family. That night, the episode aired in millions of homes. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone had exploded. Thousands of messages poured in. Texts, emails, social media notifications. People sending stories, gratitude, even poetry. Someone tagged me in a photo of a homemade sign. Build your own table. Another woman messaged a photo of her dining room. 4 plastic chairs, a thrifted table, and a plate of spaghetti, and wrote, I watched your story while feeding my kids this. And for the first time I didn't feel ashamed. I felt powerful. I sat on the floor of the living room, phone buzzing in my lap, and cried quietly. Lily walked over, curled up beside me, and whispered, Are they still talking about the laundry room? Yes, baby. She grinned. Good. That means they heard you. But it wasn't just them. 2 days later, Evelyn called. You have a speaking invitation, she said, her voice nearly breathless. From the National Women's Conference. They want you as the guest of honor at the closing session. I sat down. They said your video was the most shared speech on their platform in 5 years. Caroline, they don't just want you to speak. They want you to sit on the round table. With leaders, senators, activists, women who have shaped policy. And they said verbatim, we want the woman from the laundry room to close us out. I laughed. Actually laughed. Then I cried again. The night before the flight to Chicago, I packed our bags with more ease than I'd ever known. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't packing desperation or fear. Just outfits, just books, just a woman heading to claim her place. The conference was held at a newly built art center. Warm wood floors. Skylights that poured in light like hope. The green room smelled like roses and nerves. A woman in a red blazer sat beside me and introduced herself as a senator from California. I cried during your speech, she said. Then I made my entire team watch it. Another woman in a gray wrap sweater, an educator from Georgia, handed me a note. It read, Thank you for saying the words I couldn't say at my mother's table. I've always been the other daughter. But now I know I was just in the wrong room. When it was time, the host introduced us all, and we took our places on stage. 6 women. 6 stories. All of U.S. survivors of something. One had left a cult. Another had battled addiction. One had started over after escaping domestic violence. And each of us, somehow, had found the courage to not just survive but to speak. When my turn came, I stood, took a deep breath, and let the room go quiet. I used to think being quiet kept me safe, I said. But it kept me small. It kept me seated in places where no one passed the salt or asked me how I was doing. There were a few soft laughs. But the truth is, they didn't reject me because I lacked something. They rejected me because they couldn't see me. And that's not on me anymore. I could feel the silence deepen. His locked. Bodies leaned in. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been the one left in the hallway, the garage, the back room, the one whose name was added to the invite last, I want you to know something. You were never the problem. The room was. I ended with a line that had become my signature. Don't wait for a seat. Build your own table. The room erupted. The standing ovation lasted almost a full minute. Afterward, people waited in line to speak with me. Not out of politeness but hunger. Hunger to share. Hunger to connect. Hunger to say, me too. I left the stage not as a guest of honor, but as proof. Proof that even those sent to the shadows can step into the light. Proof that sometimes the world doesn't need your perfection, it just needs your truth. Back in the hotel room after the conference, I stood barefoot on the balcony, the night air cool against my skin. Below, the lights of Chicago shimmered like a city awake with stories, each window a life, each flicker a heartbeat. Behind me, Lily was asleep, curled up with her stuffed penguin, and Josh lay on the couch watching a documentary about women who changed the world. It struck me then, I was now one of them. Not in a grandiose, headline-making way, but in the quiet transformation of becoming fully myself. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be allowed into the room. I was in it, at the table, and sometimes the microphone was mine. That night, I received a text from Evelyn. "Check your email. Something's waiting for you." I opened it, and there it was. A PDF draft of the National Book Tour schedule. My name was right there at the top. Caroline Brooks. More Than Enough, Author Tour 2026. 12 cities. Major bookstores. Panel conversations. Meet and greets. And in bold print, special appearance at the Strand, New York. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because everything that once felt unreachable was now not only real, it was happening. A week later, we were back in New York, preparing for the first leg of the tour. Lily insisted on picking out my outfit for the Strand event. She chose a navy dress with tiny silver stars and paired it with the pearl earrings I wore during the first interview. "You look like someone important," she said, twirling in the mirror beside me. Smiled. "That's because I am." The Strand was packed, standing room only. I stood between shelves lined with stories of survival, revolution, heartbreak, and healing. And now mine lived among them. The event began with a reading. I chose a passage about that Thanksgiving night. They placed me in the laundry room, not because there wasn't space, but because there wasn't respect. And I sat there not because I didn't know better, but because I thought being tolerated was the best I could hope for. I was wrong. We are never meant to be tolerated. We are meant to be honored. The audience was quiet. Well. Then a woman in the second row raised her hand and said, "That line saved me." She told me she had left a toxic family just a month ago. They always said she was dramatic, that she took up too much space, that her kindness was weakness. After hearing my story online, she booked a therapy session for the first time in her life. Another woman, older, gray hair, soft eyes, stood and said, "I used to be someone's laundry room guest too. But now I run my own retreat center for women starting over. You helped me remember where I came from." It hit me then, the impact, not just of my words but of my survival. I hadn't just lived through hardship. I had given it a voice. And in doing so, given others permission to do the same. Josh helped me sign books that evening. Lily sat beside me, handing out bookmarks she'd designed herself. Each one had her handwriting across the top. "You are more than where they left you." Evelyn arrived halfway through, her eyes shining. "This," she whispered, "this is why we found you." I smiled and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for coming to the laundry room." She laughed, wiping a tear. "Best detour I ever made." In the weeks that followed, we traveled from city to city. Every stop brought more people. Some who had read the book, some who had just seen a clip online, some who didn't even know my name but heard there was a story being told that sounded a lot like theirs. One night in Atlanta, a high school girl waited until the line had nearly cleared. She was wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers that had seen better days. She placed a copy of my book on the table and whispered, "My mom always says we don't matter. I think you'd tell her she's wrong." He nodded. "She is wrong. And I hope one day she hears your story too." She bit her lip. "Maybe I'll write one." "You already are," I said, signing her book. "Every day you keep going, you're writing a line." By the time we returned to New York for the final stop of the tour, the book had hit the New York Times bestseller list. But none of it changed how I saw myself, not really. Because my success didn't come from polished speaking or marketing strategies. It came from surviving, from not breaking, from getting back up after being placed in rooms that weren't meant for dignity. I told Josh one night after we unpacked our final suitcase. Do you remember when we didn't know if we'd make rent? He nodded. I remember you used to turn it into a game. Like, let's see if we can stretch this spaghetti into magic. I laughed. You always thought I was joking. He grinned. I know better now. That weekend we celebrated quietly at home. Lily made a cake from a boxed mix. Josh played a song he composed himself on the old keyboard Evelyn gifted him last Christmas. The three of us sat on our little balcony under string lights I'd hung with tape and hope, and we clinked glasses of apple cider. I raised mine high. To us, I said. Josh added, to not waiting anymore. And Lily whispered, to building our own table. And so we did. The next Thanksgiving came quietly. No invitations arrived in the mail from Rebecca. No polite texts from my mother asking what we were bringing or where we'd sit. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't check the mailbox twice. Because this year, the only table that mattered was the one in our Brooklyn apartment. It wasn't grand. It wobbled slightly on one side and bore the faint water rings from too many teacups left unattended. But it was ours. And around it sat the people who had chosen me, not out of duty or blood, but out of love. Walter and Ruby from across the hall brought cranberry sauce and stories from their youth. Dina and Carla, my sisters in spirit from the Voices Rising summit, arrived early with wine and folding chairs. Evelyn came last, wearing a soft gray scarf and carrying a pot of her famous pumpkin soup, which had become something of a tradition. She hugged me long and tight at the door. I skipped 3 fancy dinners to be here, she said. Because this is the only one that feels like family. Lily was already running around with name cards she'd written in gold marker. Chosen family only. No blood required. Josh wore a button-up shirt and helped with the mashed potatoes, quietly proud in the way only a 12-year-old boy trying not to smile too much could be. As the meal began, we clinked glasses, messily, imperfectly, and bowed our heads in silence. I looked around the table, at the faces illuminated by candlelight and laughter, and realized I had never known peace like this. After dinner, Lily stood up and unfolded a paper she'd kept hidden all evening. I wrote something, she said, and the room hushed instantly. Last year, I ate dinner in a laundry room. I didn't understand why. This year I do. Because if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have found our real table. Today I know what home feels like. It's not big. It's not shiny. But it's full of people who don't make you feel small. Her voice cracked at the last sentence, and I saw Evelyn gently wipe her eyes. Josh followed, standing beside his sister with one hand in his pocket. People used to say we were too much, too loud, too messy. But now I think they just didn't know how to hold something real. Mom taught me that. And now I know. Being real matters more than being liked. I couldn't breathe. I stood, lifted my glass, and tried to find words. I used to think family was something you were born into. But now I know family is built. Brick by brick, moment by moment. Not through invitations or apologies that never come, but through the ones who show up again and again when they don't have to. The room clapped, softly at first, then louder. After dessert, Evelyn handed me a thin envelope. Something small, she said. From the team. Inside was a pin, a small gold brooch in the shape of a folding chair. I looked up. We're launching a new initiative, she explained. Helping women who've been pushed aside to find their voice again. We're calling it Pull Up a Chair. You'll be the face of it. I held the pin between my fingers and smiled. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. She leaned in, her voice low. Caroline, you were always the story. We just helped amplify the volume. Later that night, when the apartment had quieted and everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the kitchen, holding my mug of tea. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Soft, slow, silent. I thought about the year behind me. The laundry room. The limo. The conference stage. The book. The letters from women across the country. But most of all, I thought about the girl I had once been. The woman who smiled through dismissal, who stayed quiet in rooms where she wasn't wanted, who believed worth had to be earned in suffering. I wanted to reach back and whisper to her. You are more than the room they put you in. You are the architect of rooms they haven't even imagined yet. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed, more than okay. I'm home. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Because closure doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it comes from building something so full of light the shadows just fade. That night I tucked my kids in and sat at my laptop, opening a fresh document. My second book. Title: Rooms I Refused to Stay In. And I began with the line that would become the heartbeat of everything I now stood for. They said I was used to scraps. So I built a feast of my own. Never let anyone convince you that the room they've placed you in defines your value. You are not an afterthought. You are not a leftover. You are the foundation of something bigger. And when no one gives you a seat, remember, you've always had the power to build the table. Sometimes being pushed aside isn't the end. It's the beginning of building something that can't be ignored. If this story moved you, share it. If you've ever been placed in the shadows, comment below with your story. Your voice matters here. And if you're ready to build your own table, subscribe to Revenge Echoes, because we don't wait for permission to be heard.